Hi y'all, and welcome back to the garden. So it is extremely hot again. We were cooling off for a little bit, as I think you may have been where you were at, hopefully anyway, and then it's back up to like mid 80s, high 80s, 90s. So I got some stuff planted earlier this week and I'm just trying to keep it watered, and I'm kind of taking a break. I will probably plant some stuff maybe in the mornings or the evenings this weekend, because I've got to start getting stuff in the ground. I started pulling stuff out of the ground earlier this week and transplanting, but I am quickly becoming cognizant of the fact that we are very swiftly approaching our first frost I mentioned in a couple videos ago, and the weather is just not cooperating. So I've got to come out here and get done what I can, when I can. But I'm going to take you around and show you some things that I've done so far in the garden, some plants I've picked up to plant just today, and then we'll just see how it goes from there. There are a lot of things that are looking really rough. I mentioned in my last video where I was doing the hydrangea arrangement that I'm really like this close to coming out and starting my fall cleanup. This is like the first year, and it's typical this time of year for things just to not look great. They've been through a rough summer. But it's not been so much the heat for us this time of the year, it's been the rain. Like I've mentioned, I've not seen anything like it. I've had to cut back perennials that I've never had to cut back in my garden. And so things are just looking rough. And so I'm entering that part of fall, and I think just this stage of my garden's getting really full, that I'm gonna have to start selectively editing, is what I'm going to call it, some plants. Basically meaning I'm getting rid of them because one, they're not making me happy. Some of them I might give a little longer to do a better job. Others are just going to have to go, so I can replace them with some things that I'm hoping will perform a little better. So the first thing I did earlier this week was I moved this container from out front to in front of the shed here. And you can see here that it's lined up pretty evenly with this window. So I will probably be adding annuals here. It might be annuals that are drought tolerant, simply because I don't want to have to, like, this will have drip run to it anyway, but I don't tend to run the drip in my backyard very often. I don't know why it's the case, but I just don't seem to have to do that a lot. And this drip would be hooked into all the other drip that I have in the backyard, and so I don't want to have to be running that a ton. So it can be easily pull a hose to it, but it might be a perennial that I stick in there. There might be an evergreen that I find that I like that I can stick in there that's super hardy. Not sure yet. It's not a really deep bowl, so it's primarily, you know, annuals that will go in there. But that's for another time. I'm not going to be doing anything else with this container this year. I'm to the point where I've got enough projects that I'm afraid I'm not even going to finish this year that I want to get done. Second thing I did was the 𝗩𝗜𝗗𝗘𝗦 geraniums next to the fountain. I cut those back all the way to the ground. You can see they're starting to flush a little bit back. I don't know how much growth they'll put on. It was kind of empty in this area. I also removed the 𝗖𝗢𝗗𝗘𝗧𝗦 that I had here. You can see they've spread around a little bit, and I need to come through and pull these up because this is actually another plant. Here's one as well. They root really, really easily when mulch is just thrown on top of them, and since they're a low-growing, kind of ground-hugging plant, when applying mulch, if any mulch gets over them, they root really easily. So those had not done great here. I'm going to show you them later in this video where I transplanted those. They look really horrible. So I'm going to give them some time to recover in the space I planted them. If they don't recover next summer, those are going to go in the trash as well. Since my garden is full, I'm really losing patience for those plants that won't perform. It's just something that I need, and I want the plants to do well where I put them. I would typically give them another chance and move them if they're not doing well, because, you know, I'm learning too how some of these plants do in the garden, and it might be they need a little less sun, a little more sun, a little more water, a little less water, and so I will typically move them once, sometimes twice, but after that time, to the trash they go, or to a friend's house. So let's go take a look at a few other things I've done this week. I'm going to be probably this weekend digging up these Weigela. This is my Monet purple effect. probably at least these 3 right here, and I'm going to transition them to the south side of the garden, away from this big blue Liriope here. That's actually spreading. I know some people say Liriope spreads really bad in their garden. This one's, it's starting to spread quite a bit, more than I expected it to. I have a variegated Liriope up front in the flower beds that I have people comment on quite often because it's a really, really bright grass. It doesn't look like a typical variegated variety that I've seen elsewhere, but it was in the garden when I got it. And so I don't know if it's a special variety or not. It just tends to turn super almost white. It grows and has spread really extremely slowly because it is variegated. And so I have not had that grass spread like that. So this big blue is going to be interesting. I'll have to keep it a little more controlled. I'm going to come through and dig out some of those suckers and kind of plant them in between the rows so it'll form a nice row over time. Some stuff like the zinnias are still coming into bloom, but I'm at that point in the garden. I think I'll make a few more bouquets, and I am like really close to just coming through and pulling stuff out because I don't want to be out here in November doing that stuff because I have a lot of things that I just need to get done because I don't want my spring to be like this coming spring where I just had a ton of stuff to do. It's reaching the point where I just really want to enjoy the garden in the spring instead of having a big list of projects. Now that the garden is getting pretty full, I think that's more recognizable. I did get some things in the ground here. This is a space I think I'm also going to leave a lot until spring to see how it does. I think I've mentioned in here I was looking for some plants that might do well in this spot. I think a lot of people who have commented kind of underestimated how deep the shade is in this location. And so I think it's going to be hard to find things that do pretty well. And so like over here, I've got some things that are a similar shade, you know, area. And I think the Sun King Aralias will transition up there nicely. So I'll get some more of those. This is a lemony lace elderberry, and it has slowly over the past 3 years just gone downhill and declined severely. So I don't think it's getting enough sun. And that is one of those things that I'm talking about. Like lemony lace elderberry needs like part sun. It doesn't like a lot of sun. It's yellow, so it could burn pretty badly. However, in my case, it gets pretty good evening sun, like probably a good few hours, probably at least 4 hours of sun. And it's not performing good enough. And so that's something I'm going to be moving to the south side garden in a location where that area does get really hot. But I think where I'm going to place it, I'll show you in a moment. It will be protected in the morning and protected in the evening. So it'll get a good block of sun in the middle of the day. And if it burns, I might move that again because I really love it, but it's just going to sit there and die in that location if I leave it there. So I came through earlier this week and planted some things in this area too. I got the Golden Shadows dogwood in the ground here, which will get kind of large and grow up here and kind of mask this corner. I did plant the ruby slippers hydrangea right here, and so all that's around here is hostas. So these hostas can eventually be moved out of the way. I did want to give this ruby slippers enough light in the morning so it would perform, because if I put it back too far next to the tree, it's going to have some pretty deep shade and I may not get blooms on it. So in the coming years, as this ruby slippers crawls out, as I know they like to do, I'll just move these hydrangeas to other parts of the garden or give them away to friends. I got the lemon lime nandina here, which I'm considering moving it because I forgot about another hydrangea that I was going to stick here. So I'm probably going to move that over just a little bit so it can still get a little bit of sunlight here, and put another hydrangea right here. This hydrangea is Little Lime Punch, which I picked up from Natorps earlier today. It's a really nice specimen. I wanted some color and some just white hydrangea texture right here in this spot. I am probably going to come through and add maybe an evergreen here. I need to remove some of these hostas. These hostas have been here for several years now, and they're really lovely and full, but I just need something in winter, because in winter there's nothing here. It's all this hosta foliage is gone, obviously. So I think an evergreen somewhere over here maybe, and I might bump this hydrangea back and put an evergreen right up front. Maybe put one right there too. Still making decisions there, but You can see I got lots of plans for this area. I'm going to be pulling out all of these coneflowers. You can see how black the flowers are because we've just had so much rain. And I'm going to be putting hydrangeas down here that I'm pulling out from the backyard because they'll get good morning sun, a real good amount of morning sun, and they should bloom really well for me. They are the Tough Stuff AHA, so they stay pretty small. Just think it'll look nice here if they bloom pretty well. I've not had great success with Tough Stuff, but I don't think I've given them enough sun or I've given them too much sun. So I'm trying to find a balance here. And then that might continue around here where I've got these heuchera planted now. I will move those. This area, I am probably gonna come through and potentially pull up these geraniums early in preparation for fall and move these roses. The roses are looking really bad. They don't get enough sun here either. And you can see there's been a lot of die-off because of that. So those are going to be transitioned to the backyard where they'll get more sun and be hopefully a lot more happy. And then we'll get all of this area cleaned up. This 𝗍𝗏𝗏, I did trim the blooms off of it, and it is going to get removed this weekend somewhere else in the garden and replaced with the tiny quick fire that I have. There's another 𝗍𝗏𝗏 right here that I'm going to dig up and replace with this Monrovia shrub that I just got today called Little Rascal Holly. It stays 2 to 3 foot tall and wide, and I actually really love this contrasting foliage color and texture here. So I need evergreen interest in this spot. I'm probably going to stick a boxwood back there, but there's no evergreen interest up here in this bed, which is a real problem in winter. I have this structure of the Crimson Queen maple, which is really nice in winter. The lavender hedge stays in winter as well, but everything else dies down. So I'm trying to add some features in here where this bed doesn't look just barren in winter. And I've considered actually putting another evergreen right here on the corner, but I probably wouldn't do that on that side, and the fact that they'll be a little different might bother me. So we're going to start with this holly here, and then I will probably put an evergreen there. I may actually move this Bobo hydrangea or give this away to someone. It was one that rooted from a mulch covering the stem a couple years ago, so it's not anything that I have invested money in, it's just time, and then I can move a boxwood or some other evergreen right here. Now the area of the garden that I'm kind of excited about this fall, it's one of those things where I'm excited about what I'm putting in here. I am a bit nervous of how it's going to look next year because of the sheer amount of heat this side of the house gets and the awkward lighting conditions, because it is blocked a bit in the morning by the spruce, but it gets really hot sun for a few hours in the day, and then it's protected in the evening as well. And so what I've been working on this week was getting a lot of those plants I've showed you in recent videos in the ground. And I've tried to create an interesting palette of color here. You can see I came through and removed all the drip irrigation. So this is that spaghetti drip irrigation system that I was talking about, and I've just left it here until I was able to show it to you in this video, and then I'm going to stick that somewhere where it can be disposed of or reuse the pieces as I need it. And I'm going to come through and actually put 1/2 inch drip irrigation, which you can see right here. But for now, I did come through and move the butterfly bush. So the butterfly bush was right here somewhere. I stuck it on the corner here and it looked really nice. It is severely shriveled up because of the heat that we transitioned to this week. I think it'll be fine. I just need to come through and give it a little extra water. So I'm considering sticking the lemony lace elderberry behind there. It'll be protected by this tree, by the spruce in general in the morning, and then protected that way from the evening sun. And so I think although it will get a pretty good chunk of sun in the middle of the day, I think it will grow up and be a nice yellow Japanese maple type foliage in this area, because I need something to fill this back space. And as we transition down, we got the butterfly bush. I did stick one of those lemon lime nandinas here, so we also have the yellow touch of color there. The blue kazoo spirea, so yellow blue. Pink rose, this is the reminiscent pink. I think will be really beautiful and grow up right here. I did stick those Monrovia St. John's worts here, so we have the champagne and the sangria. I need to come out here and water because this one's getting a little droopy too. It has put on some new growth that's a little lighter in color. I put the Brandywine Viburnum, this rose, which is Distant Drums. Heirloom Roses sent me out Distant Drums about 2 months ago. They saw the video that I made on the roses that I ordered earlier this year and reached out to me and was kind enough to send this one out. because it is the parent of the rose that I've showed you earlier this year that I planted on this arbor called the Impressionist. I've gotten a couple good blooms out of it, but it is getting pretty high here along this trellis. So I'm hopeful that it will continue to grow up really nicely. And we'll have some nice blooms next year for that. But here's where I stuck those Yuki cherry blossom deutzias. So they look really bad, as this is why I moved them, because there's hardly any leaves on a lot of the stems. I considered come through and cutting them down to the ground, but I don't want them, since they were transition, I don't want to cut everything off because I'm afraid they will definitely shock if they don't have any way to photosynthesize in this location. So we're going to leave those here. They will be a nice low ground cover shrub to fill in this area here. I did pick up this Fire Chief Arborvitae earlier today too. Fire Chief has never been one of my favorites, but I felt like I needed an evergreen here that had some interesting color all winter. And of course it kind of plays against this blue here, more yellow, and the darker foliage of the St. John's wort. So I'm considering sticking it right in the center there. It's possible I may move it down a little bit to kind of contrast here against this black, back in black sedum. But what I'm looking to do here, and what I think would be an interesting project, is to not use a lot of perennials in this bed. I know I have the sedums here, I got the irises, but everything else in this bed so far, except the grass here too, is a shrub. And it would be really just interesting to fill the space with all little shrubs. I love using little shrubs. As you know, I plant a ton of them, and so I'm kind of looking for interesting little evergreen shrubs right now to incorporate throughout the garden, because I really want to focus a lot more on that winter interest. And so, you know, I have tons of boxwoods. I do love my boxwoods, but there's a lot of interesting pines, some different colorful arborvitae and things that are also really interesting to add to your garden for both interest in the summer and the spring and the fall and the winter. So year-round interest. I am really loving, and although they haven't put on a ton of growth this year, they have at least doubled in size, these little �10𝗏 arborvitae. I still just love these things. They're just perfect little spheres. And I think once this area grows up, we'll have this nice strappy, big blue liriope backed by a perfect hedge of �10𝗏 arborvitae and tons of weeds. Just the rain has just been relentless on weeds. So if you've been following along, don't be surprised if you open up the next few videos and I've come through and cut down a bunch of stuff. There's just a lot of projects that I didn't think were going to take a really long time, but since the weather's not cooperating I like that they're taking a little longer than I wanted them to. So I'm going to try and get a head start on fall cleanup, which I typically don't do a lot of fall cleanup, but I'm going to try and minimize some of my spring cleanup that I have to do in the spring. And so there's going to probably be stuff that I cut back that I would not traditionally cut back in the fall, just to make things easier and to prevent some things from reseeding. I typically love to leave my echinacea standing, but I'm having a real big problem with them reseeding too. And generally those nice designer, I guess I'll call them echinacea, the echinacea that's been bred to be all of these interesting colors, the seedlings from them oftentimes revert back to the standard like purple echinacea. And there's actually a few that I've got to dig up, and they come up everywhere in my case. And so I want to make sure I'm not having any of that as well. I would rather put food out for the birds in winter and have them feed on that food than have a bunch of weeds in my garden come spring that I need to tend to and pull up and that sort of thing. So there's a lot to accomplish over the next few weeks. I have another project that I'm going to mention in a separate video. I don't know that it's going to be a fall project. It probably will not be at the rate things are going, but it's definitely going to be a spring project, and it's one of the reasons I want to get some things done this fall so I don't have to dump into a bunch of projects in the spring that I really want to make this work out. So y'all follow along. I'm really excited to share that because it's not something that I have a whole lot of in my garden. I think it's going to make a big impact next year, maybe this fall if I get to it. Thank you guys for following along. And remember, in a world full of hate, be a light. Take care.